Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. This video is kind of going to be a follow-up to the last video about the half hour of silence in the Salt Lake Temple and how that may relate to the original dedication of the Salt Lake Temple in the upcoming rededication in 2027. But you don't have to have watched that video to understand this one. If you did watch that video, just know that that was not meant to be a comprehensive presentation or study into the half hour of silence. This is a topic that I've talked about so many times on the channel, but I was surprised to find out that I didn't already have this on my spreadsheet called Quotes A through Z. And so right now I'm in the process of getting that all filled out, finding all the scriptures, all the quotes. And in this one, we're going to talk about the concept of a half hour being 21 years, like a half hour in God's time being 21 years. We're going to be talking about the opening of the seventh seal, because that factors into it as well. So I got some interesting stuff. I have like a really, really interesting idea about the 21 years and how, what if it's actually 210 years? Now I'll explain that in just a minute, but that's a really interesting number when you think about how we just celebrated the 200th anniversary of the first vision, and then if you add 10 more years, that takes us to 2030. So there may be reason to kind of look at it that way, but I'll explain that in just a minute. There were a number of you that brought this up, the whole idea of 21 years in the comments, but I chose this comment right here because it mentions a few different things that I want to touch on. So this is from Keiser Soz. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that, 8302. And he says, in the year 2000, Elder Faust said, "Now is the half an hour silence in heaven." So this is already done, as half an hour in earthly terms means approximately 21 years. Some trumpets we also saw or heard already, so better get ready, ... smiley face. And then there's some scriptures that you can look up. So I've heard this a number of times, that some general authority has said that the seventh seal has already been opened, that the half hour of silence has already started, but I haven't been able to substantiate that. I need to be able to verify it. So if you know where I can find that, Keiser Soz or anybody else, please send it to me. I feel like I would have already come across that by now. I've been doing this full time for 3.5 years, and I get so many things sent to me, and this hasn't come up, although I have heard it. I think in other YouTube videos, maybe also comment sections of those videos. I don't know where to find it, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's true. I just don't know where to find it. I need to verify it. As far as it being 21 years, we don't know that for sure. At some point, as I continue collecting information about the half hour of silence, I want to say that Elder Orson Pratt said, we don't know if it's like literally a half hour or if it's 21 years because of the Lord's time. Because when you think of it like this, in case this is a new concept to you, we know from the scriptures that one day to the Lord, according to his time, is 1,000 years here on earth. Okay. So what you do is you take 1,000 years, you divide that into 24 hours, like God's hours, right? So divide 1,000 by 24. And so you have an hour equaling about 41.66 years. If you divide that in half for a half hour, then you get almost 21 years. Okay. So that's where this concept comes from. I haven't seen anything that authoritatively says it's 21 years or that the half hour is an actual half hour or any other, whatever. So I don't know that we can say that for sure, but I would say that it's a good possibility that maybe it is 21 years. It could also just be a general time frame. It may not be strictly, whatever the conversion rate is. It could just be like a general period for all we know. I don't know. And then with the trumpets, I don't know that we can say authoritatively that, this trumpet is done. Now we're on this trumpet, because that would have to come from an authoritative source. I tend to think that the 7 trumpets and the different calamities that they bring is a general thing. It's meant to convey, completion, the completion of the Lord's work before the second coming, the judgments that are coming on the wicked, in that we're seeing all these things simultaneously. That's just my opinion, but I haven't seen anything to say, oh, okay, now we're on this trumpet. But I agree. I think that we have seen the trumpets or the things associated with them. I just don't know that we can check them off like a list, like check off all 7. So I don't know, but thank you for your comment. So let's go to this whole idea. This was the first thing I wanted to share. This whole idea that what if, that this is right, that a half hour is meant to be in God's time, but then you times it by 10. And so if you times it by 10, let's just do that. Well, let me get it. Let's do, well, okay, I'll do it like this. We'll times it by 10. So that would bring us to 208 years. Now you might be asking, why would we times it by 10? Okay, so we'll come back to this. Why would we do that? Well, let's go to Daniel chapter 9. And this is where we get the prophecy from the angel Gabriel to Daniel about the 70 weeks. So I'm just going to read verse 24. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression. So this is after the 10 tribes were taken away captive into Assyria, and that kingdom was destroyed. Now it was the southern kingdom, or the Jews. It was their turn. The Babylonians came. And so this happened because of wickedness, because they rejected the prophets, right? And so the angel is saying to finish the transgression and to make an end of sins and to make reconciliation for iniquity and to bring in everlasting righteousness and to seal up the vision and prophecy and to anoint the most holy. It goes on to talk about Christ coming and other things. Again, this is not meant to be a comprehensive study into this, although I would encourage you to watch this video that talks about this. There's certain schools of thought, mostly among evangelicals, that say, oh, you have the 70 weeks of Daniel. And what it is that it's weeks of years, which seems to be true. Weeks of years where every 7 years is a week. Okay. And I have this on my spreadsheet called Timeline Second Coming. So we're looking at columns K and L. Okay. So I'm not going to go into the minutia of this whole thing right here, but you can see if it approximately started down here. Let me scroll down. So you have like the first week, you have year 1, 2, 3. Okay. And 7 years is a week in the sense of this scripture and this prophecy. Then if you do 70 weeks, then what you do is you take 7 years, times it by 7, you get 490 years. Okay. So there's like this time frame. Now, for some reason, and I know why, but I don't really want to get into it. You have mostly evangelicals that take this last week and detach it and bring it all the way forward, like 2,000 years later, to our own time. I don't adopt that point of view at all. I would encourage you to watch this video. He explains it very clearly and concisely, and this seems to be more in line with our church. But anyway, that's not the point. So you have the concept here where you have 70 weeks of years, but this is not according to our time. Our time is a week is made up of 7 earth days. 7 days make up a week. This is not how we do time. But this is also not how the Lord does time. According to, a week for the Lord is 7,000 years according to our time. So this whole thing with 70 weeks, that's like some other way of measuring time. I know the whole thing where it's like, well, it's just like a simplified way of saying 7 periods of, X amount of time. It's like, and so I believe that the consensus with biblical scholars, and also the church manuals from our own church, is that it's a 490 years. Okay. But ultimately we don't really know. It hasn't been revealed if it's just that, or if there's like some other thing, like maybe there's some other measurement of time that hasn't been revealed to us. So with that in mind, this is neither our time nor God's 1,000 day, like 1,000 years is a daytime. This is like some other measurement of time. When we come back to the half hour of silence, and if we do it according to God's time, but then you times it by 10, I just think that it's really interesting that if you added 208 to the year of the first vision, 1820, this would bring you to the year 2028, which is the year after the Solid Temple is going to be rededicated. Now, if you do it 21, like you round it up to 21 and then you times that by 10, then it would be 210. Add 210 years to 1820, and that would bring you to 2030. And I know a lot of you are looking at 2030 because that's, like 2,000 years since Christ started his ministry. Some of you are looking at 2033, 2034. I'm not really looking that far out. I'm more of the opinion that the second coming is going to happen sooner than later, but I'm not opposed to it. We'll just wait and see what happens. But this is kind of an interesting concept. If you take the half hour of silence, you do it according to God's time, but then you times it by 10, that would basically be the length of this dispensation if it ends, in 2028, 2030, and then we move on into the millennium. So that's just kind of an interesting thing. I just wanted to put that out there. I don't necessarily adopt that idea. It just came to me. Okay. So now let's see what's next. Let's talk about the seventh seal and, when would that have been open? So first we need to take a look at this. This is Doctrine and Covenants 77 verse 12, where it's like this question and answer session about the book of Revelation. What does this mean? What does that mean? And here we learn that each of the 7 seals represent 1,000-year period of Earth's temporal existence. Okay. In the beginning of the 7th 1,000 years, will the Lord sanctify the earth and complete the salvation of man and judge all things, and shall redeem all things, except that which he hath not put into his power, when he shall have sealed all things unto the end of all things, and the sounding of the trumpets of the 7 angels are the preparing and finishing of his work, in the beginning of the 7th 1,000 years, the preparing of the way before the time of his coming. Now, it's in the beginning of the 7,000 years, or the 7th seal, that you have the half hour of silence. Let's just read that right now. So we go to the book of Revelation, chapter 8, verse 1, and it says, "And when he had opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour." And then it goes on to talk about the 7 angels and the trumpets and the calamities that are associated with those 7 angels and trumpets. Okay. All right. So going back here, so the half hour of silence is associated with the 7th seal, specifically the opening of the 7th seal, the first part of the 7th seal. Okay, let's move on. We have this from Elder Bruce R. McConkie of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. This is in Mormon Doctrine. And this is under a section called The Generation of Our Lord's Return. So here he talks about the fact that we can know the generation. You have President Wilford Woodruff, who taught that we can know the generation. We have a thing from Joseph Smith, where he talked about the rising generation. And Elder Bruce R. McConkie, does all the calculations here. I've gone over this a million times over. And Based on what Joseph Smith prophesied about the rising generation during his day, Elder Bruce R. McConkie says, after doing the calculations, the rising generation, would be alive well past the year 2000 AD. You might be confused why he says that. Just pause, and then you can read this and you can follow his reasoning. Continuing, this reasoning takes on added significance when considered in connection with the revelation that states categorically that Christ will come in the beginning of the 7,000 years. So, and I think that this is right. I think he has it right. That the year 2000 probably was the opening of the seventh seal. If it is meant to be like a specific day, a specific time, I think that that's probably right. Could be the year 2000, the year 2001. I don't know. And so if that's the case, then the half hour of silence would have started around that time. In the last video, I was talking about the Salt Lake Temple, and I didn't know. It just seemed like the half hour of silence has to do with the release of angels to bring judgment on the earth after the half hour of silence is over. So, I mean, I don't know. For all we know, maybe it was back in 1893. I tend to think it's more the year 2000, or maybe it's not going to be until 2027 when the Salt Lake Temple is rededicated. So you have angels that were released in 1893, but maybe the final thing, like what we were talking about in the last video, the final harvesting, separating judgments comes after the rededication. And maybe that's when the half hour starts. Maybe it's a literal half hour. Who knows? But whatever the case, the year 2000, I tend to believe that. A couple more things. By the way, this is my spreadsheet called Quotes A through Z. This is currently row 4 for 7,000 years. And what's really interesting is we have a couple quotes, one from President Nelson and one from President Oaks, that seem to confirm the fact that we are now into this the temporal existence of this earth. We are now past 6,000 years. So that would mean that the first 6 seals are now done and that we're in the 7th. So President Nelson, he said in this devotional for young adults, May 15th, 2022, Heavenly Father has sent his children to earth for more than 6 millennia. It's interesting. You know that President Nelson is careful with his words, and he's not given to hyperbole, according to Sister Nelson. He's very deliberate. And then we have President Oaks, who says, this is the first presidency Christmas devotional. Oh yeah, the last one of 2024. The name of the talk is Celebrating Christmas. And he says, over 1 billion people will celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ during this Christmas season. The whole world should do so. Even in worldly terms, Jesus of Nazareth is the most important person who ever lived. He is the principal subject of prophets and poets for over 6,000 years. Now, I have searched before, and I have not come across any other general authorities that have said over 6,000 years. If anything, they've said, we're about, or what do they usually say? My brain's not working right now. Like almost 6,000 years, I think is usually what they say. But these are the only 2 times that I've found general authorities, and not just general authorities. This is the president of the church and the first counselor in the first presidency, who both have said over 6,000 years. And I don't think that that's insignificant. So in terms of the 7th seal being opened, this is the most official and authoritative that I can give you. And I tend to think that they are not just like saying this, that it's deliberate. That's what I think. So I do think that the 7th seal is open. Another thing that I've heard many times over, I think it all comes from one source. I think it's from this really popular presentation that It's not out there anymore, but before I started my channel, there was a popular Second Coming presentation that talked about the opening of the seventh seal. And I seem to recall that it talked about the seventh seal being opened with the dedication of the Palmyra, New York temple. And I think that that could very well be the case. So this is my spreadsheet called Signs Church Specific. There's a couple interesting things that happened with the dedication of the Palmyra, New York temple. Again, remember, this is near the site of the first vision. And I don't know, it just makes me think about what we were talking about earlier, about 210 years from the time of the first vision. You know, we just recently had this 200-year anniversary celebration of the first vision in the April 2020 General Conference. And April 2020 was clearly the beginning of a new phase, I think, in world history. But I don't know, it just all seems to go together very well. Okay, so you had this thing where there was temporary sunshine and calm during the dedication from the rain. It was like a rainy day, but during the dedication, or at least, when it was happening, there was sunshine and calm. I have the full account right here. Again, you can access my spreadsheet anytime. The link is in the description box below. And it also happened to coincide with what's called the Great Aurora and Geomagnetic Storm of 2000, April 6th through 7th. So there was solar activity happening on that day. And for those 2 days, you had this aurora that took place. You can read the paper right here. I have my source over here in this column. And then also, we have different statements talking about the fact that the Palmyra, New York temple was dedicated on the 2000th anniversary, or in other words, birthday of the Savior. He would have turned 2,000 years old on that day. So he would have turned 1 year old on April 6th of the year 1 AD, 2 years old in the year 2 AD, and then all the way to the year 2000 on April 6th. That's when he turned 2,000 years old, according to his earthly birth, right? So it was a very, very special temple, and special things were happening in the heavens along with the dedication of that temple. President Hinckley said that this was perhaps the most important temple in the church because it was, near the site of the sacred grove. So yeah, I do think it's a pretty good candidate, this dedication, a good candidate for the opening of the seventh seal. Don't know for sure. Again, if you have a quote that confirms that, please send it my way. Okay, now we're going to read just a few more things about the half hour of silence. Here's my quotes A through Z spreadsheet, the new row 212 half hour of silence, and I've added some more stuff here. So we just read from the book of Revelation that there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour after the opening of the seventh seal. Let's go to the Institute Student Manual for Revelation 8, and this section is called Desolation Poured Out. John beheld a short period of silence when the seventh seal was opened, a time when the angels of heaven are awaiting the command to execute the Lord's justice. Okay, before we continue, in the last video, we were reading from Doctrine and Covenants, and there was a scripture that was talking about that the silence was caused by wickedness, just the wickedness of the world. But it goes hand in hand, the wickedness that prevails, it goes during this period, goes hand in hand with this, the angels waiting to bring justice and judgments. So it's those two things, wickedness and the angels waiting to take care of that situation. Okay, it goes on to say, Zephaniah described a similar period of silence that preceded the ancient destruction of Judah. Let's read that. We're not going to read the whole thing because it's pretty long. For the purposes of this video, I'm just going to read this first verse. Hold thy peace. So don't talk, quiet. Hold thy peace at the presence of the Lord. For the day of the Lord is at hand, for the Lord hath prepared a sacrifice. He hath bid his guests. Okay, so it's a lot of like second coming talk. So, okay, so you see it there in Zephaniah. The Lord's judgment and intervention are described as times when the Lord does not keep silent. Times when he does not keep silent. And then it has a couple more scriptures. Psalms 50, verses 3 through 4. Our God shall come and shall not keep silence. A fire shall devour before him. Well, this sounds a lot like this half hour of silence that we're waiting for. There's like the opening of the seventh seal, the half hour of silence, judgment comes in the form of, the seven angels and the calamities and destructions that come with them in their trumpets. And then after that, you have the destruction of the wicked by fire. So, our God shall come and shall not keep silence. A fire shall devour before him, and it shall be a very tempestuous round about him. He shall call to the heavens from above into the earth, that he may judge his people. And then the student manual also points us to Isaiah 65, verse 6. Behold, it is written before me, I will not keep silence, but will recompense, even recompense into their bosom. All right, let's go back here. Following this period of silence, John saw fire and desolation poured out during the seventh seal and preceding the second coming of Christ. Because the number 7 often symbolizes completion, the destructions of the seventh seal may be seen as preparing for the completion of God's work on earth. These destructions are described in Revelation, and then it has the scriptures. You may want to take a look at this chapter 54 in the New Testament student manual, because it talks about, here's the trumpets, and it talks about the 4 horsemen. That's something that people usually get wrong. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. They're actually associated with the first 4,000 years of Earth's history. But anyway, it talks about it here. Another thing to keep in mind is it talks about the fact that some of these numbers, they may just be symbolic. So, for example, the 200 million that are supposed to participate in Armageddon, it's not clear if that's symbolic or if it's literal. The whole thing with like 42 months, 3.5 years, I've made videos about this before, but there's a lot to say about that. There was a part I wanted to show you where it breaks down the seals. Oh, it's right here. So I go with this. Sometimes there's just like all these like people trying to figure out the scriptures and coming up with their own interpretations and speculating and guessing. I'm going to go with what the church has published. And they talk about the different seals. Here's the first seal, which was about 4,000 to 3,000 BC. It's associated with the white horse. And then it breaks down the symbolism. And then second seal, 3,000 to 2,000, red horse, And then you go to the seventh seal. Oh, oops. Oh, it doesn't have the seventh seal on here, but it says the sixth seal goes from about the year 1000 to the year 2000. So I think we're there. It really could be that we are in the half hour of silence right now. It could be, think about this, from the dedication of the Palmyra, New York temple until the year 2020. Okay, that's 20 years. It's not 21, but it is 20 years. And things did change in the year 2020. We were just talking about that. So maybe the half hour of silence is over, and maybe it started in the year 2020. And we are now in this period of the 7 angels and the 7 trumpets and the final, like the finishing of this work before the second coming. I feel like that makes a lot of sense. everybody recognizes, everybody around the whole world, I think, even people that are not religious, realize that the year 2020 really represented something like what we haven't seen before. It really changed the world. And the years that have followed have been really crazy as well. Okay, so I'm going to finish this up with Joshua. I know I've shared this a number of times, but there's always new people that are subscribing. So I think we get a pretty clear picture of this in the story of Jericho. I think that this story is actually a foreshadowing of our own time in the second coming and the seven seals and the seven angels. This is the first time in scripture that you see a set of seven trumpets. You find a set here, you find a set in the book of Revelation, and then you have two more sets of seven trumpets in Doctrine and Covenants section 88. Those are the four places that you find trumpets. And I think that they all go together. Before I continue, I just want to remind you, for any of you that are like, oh, you don't know about the 144,000. We haven't seen that yet. The Antichrist, the blah, 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 blah. I invite you to come to my spreadsheet called Quotes, Common Misconceptions. Read the very first one. We haven't seen the 144,000 yet. That is not true. That is just, it is not true. You can go through here, read what Joseph, oh, sorry, this is not the first one. It's row 4. You can see what Joseph Smith has said. He said that, yes, the selection process had already begun back in his day. And anyway, there's a lot more. If you don't want to do that, I have a playlist for the 144,000. So if that's easier for you, just watch this playlist. You can also watch this one about the one person Antichrist, which is not the doctrine of this church. It's never been taught. In fact, the church has published things contrary to this concept, but many people in the, eschatology community, they listen a lot to like what evangelicals say, and they're really big into this like tribulation period, supposed tribulation period, and the Antichrist. It's not our doctrine. Just, you can watch this playlist or go to my spreadsheet. It's on here too. I have a bunch of stuff about the Antichrist. The man of sin has already been revealed. It happened with Joseph Smith. There's an actual day when the man of sin that's mentioned in the New Testament was revealed. So it's right here. Anyway, and then I also have, if you want to, a while ago, let's see, I guess this was a year ago for Daniel, 2 years ago for the book of Revelation. I went chapter by chapter. We read the chapter, like chapter 1 in the book of Daniel, and then we read what it said in the Institute student manual. I would encourage you to go through this, and it should be pretty eye-opening. It should clarify a lot of things in what our church's doctrine is when it comes to this, because if you're left to your own devices, like you are with all these other Christian churches, you don't have a prophet, you don't have official revelation and your interpretation for things, then you're just left to your own devices. And you try and figure out these things. Some things you can, but when it comes to like these more obscure, ambiguous scriptures that have to do with prophecy, that's why you get all these people just with their interpretations and charts and timelines. And they're doing the best that they can. I think that's great, but we do have an interpretation for a lot of these things. So please look at what our church says first before you go elsewhere. So the book of Daniel, the book of Revelation playlist, I'll put the links for all 4 of these playlists in the description box below, or you can also look at my other playlists that I have. Just go to that section. Okay. So Joshua chapter 6, think of this in terms of the 7,000 years of this earth's temporal history. And let's pay special attention to the 7th day and what the Israelites do on that day. Okay. Because they talk about a period of silence in this chapter. So, okay. And the Lord said unto Joshua, see, I have given into thine hand Jericho, which I believe is a foreshadowing and symbol of the world, and the king thereof, which would be a symbol of and a foreshadowing of the government, the political government during the millennium. Right now, you have the nations of the world. They're going to fall, and Christ will be king in the millennium. Okay? And by the way, this is after Israel wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, and they went through a purification process, and now they were ready to enter the promised land, which I believe would symbolize the millennium, the righteous inheriting the earth, during the millennium. And okay, so you get it. So okay, in the mighty men of valor, and ye shall compass the city, all ye men of war, and go round about the city once. Thus shalt thou do 6 days. So what we've had during Earth's history, the 6 days in God's time, is you have these seals and you have the things that happen in each one of these days. You have these different dispensations in the seals, times where the warning call went out, the gospel was preached. Okay, I feel like this is a symbol of that. Israel going around the city, or in other words, the gospel being preached around the world during each dispensation. So I think that's why it's like this in this story. And 7 priests, so you can substitute that for angels, and 7 priests, like a foreshadowing of the angels of our time. And 7 priests shall bear before the ark 7 trumpets of ram's horns. And the 7th day ye shall compass the city 7 times. And the priests shall blow with the trumpets. So what's interesting is right now, if we are in the 7th seal, the gospel is going even further than it possibly could have in the previous 6,000 years. And that's because of technology. It's because of advancements in travel, but also information technology. The internet is a good example of that. So I feel like that could be the symbolism here in the foreshadowing. And it shall come to pass that when ye make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when ye hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout. And the wall of the city shall fall down flat, and the people shall ascend up every man straight before him. And Joshua the son of Nun called the priests, and said unto them, Take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord. And he said unto the people, Pass on and encompass the city, and let him that is armed pass on before the ark of the Lord. And it came to pass, when Joshua had spoken unto the people, that the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns passed on before the Lord, and blew with the trumpets, and the ark of the Lord, the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. And the armed men went before the priests that blew with the trumpets, and the rearward came after the ark, the priests going on and blowing with the trumpets. And Joshua had commanded the people, saying, Now listen to this. This sounds like the half hour of silence. And Joshua commanded the people, saying, Ye shall not shout, nor make any noise with your voice, neither shall any word proceed out of your mouth, until the day I bid you shout. Then shall ye shout. So the ark of the Lord compassed the city, going about it once, and they came into the camp and lodged in the camp. And Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. And 7 priests, bearing 7 trumpets of ram's horns, before the ark of the Lord went on continually, and blew with the trumpets, and the armed men went before them. But the rearward came after the ark of the Lord, the priests going on and blowing with the trumpets. And the 2nd day they compassed the city once, and returned into the camp. So they did 6 days. And it came to pass on the 7th day that they rose early about the dawning of the day. Now, just really quick, we were just talking about the opening of the 7th seal, how that's like a key time, like that first half hour, the early part of that, the Lord's day, the 7th day of this earth's temporal existence, the first part. And they rose early about the dawning of the day, and compassed the city after the same manner 7 times. Only on that day they compassed the city 7 times. And it came to pass on the 7th time that the priest blew with the trumpets. Joshua said unto the people, shout, for the Lord hath given you the city. And it's really interesting because in Doctrine and Covenants, it talks about there being a shout. I've done videos about that before. And what's interesting is that during the April 2020 General Conference, we did a Hosanna shout, a church-wide Hosanna shout. Typically, Hosanna shouts are only for the dedication of temples. There was a Hosanna shout for the dedication of the conference center. And there are like special times when it happens, but it's not very often. So that's kind of interesting. Excuse me. What's also interesting is you have Rahab, the harlot. And in the scriptures, a lot of times Israel is compared to like a harlot or a whore, an unfaithful, what's it called? Like a fiance, essentially, that has committed adultery on the bridegroom or the husband. And I think it's interesting that you have the city of Jericho that's taken and destroyed, which would represent all of wickedness, everything that's celestial being destroyed. But you do have this one little bit of the population, Rahab and her family, that are saved. Just like how, that's what it's going to be like for us, for the church, and also everyone that's living a terrestrial law. But I just think that that's an interesting detail, and I think that's right. And then afterwards, it talks about the walls falling down, and then the city was burnt with fire, just like the world is going to be burnt with fire. So anyway, so those are things to consider. I haven't seen anything that officially says that the 7th seal was open at whatever time. For all we know, maybe it was with the dedication of the Salt Lake Temple. Maybe it was the year 2000. Maybe it hasn't been opened yet. Maybe it's going to be open with the rededication of the Salt Lake Temple. I have to say that we don't know, but the most solid thing that I can give you is this, that President Nelson and President Oaks have both said recently that it's been more than 6,000 years. And if that's the case, well, then we must be in the 7,000 years. And that probably means that the half hour of silence has already started. And my best guess is that it probably is with the dedication of the Palmyra, New York temple. And then it probably ended with the year 2020. And it could still be related to the Salt Lake Temple and the rededication, because maybe between the year 2020 and 2027, when the Salt Lake Temple is rededicated, maybe this 7 years is the time when the half hour is ended and the angels are doing their work. And it does seem like they're doing their work. It does to me. I don't know about you, but ever since 2020, it does seem like they're doing their work. So, okay. So there you go. There's more that I need to add on to this spreadsheet. The one for, not this one, for the half hour of silence. Like I said, I remember Elder Orson Pratt talking about it. I'm sure that Elder Bruce Armour Conkey has probably talked more about it. So I'll try and hunt those down. But this is what I have for right now on my spreadsheets, even though I've already covered a lot of this stuff in other videos. So. Okay, that's going to be it for this one. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.